What's up, weirdos? I'm Felicia and I like scary movies, and today I have agonized over this list. It's really embarrassing. But yes, I'm gonna be giving you my top 10 best horror films of 2020 list. I'm also gonna give you, because I just can't help myself, my runners up and also a few special mentions. I made myself a gin and tonic because I didn't know how long this would take to film. Now, if you like my videos and you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and let's get into it. So, number 10, The Call. This is a South Korean horror movie that I truly stumbled across on Netflix one night, hadn't heard a thing about it, and totally fell in love with it. It's an awesome movie. It's about two people living in different times. Seo-yeon lives in the present and Young-suk lives in the past. One phone call connects the two and their lives are changed forever. This was directed by Chung Hyung-lee and is actually a remake of The Caller, which is a British and Puerto Rican horror film. But this is such a good mystery thriller movie that really takes that turn into straight up horror towards the end that I just really appreciated. I loved both the characters that we're dealing with the whole time. I love the idea of two women being connected by this like chunky 90s landline phone and how they learn about each other and start changing each other's lives from their own time periods. It's just awesome. If you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix. It's really good. Number 9. This was a tough spot for me because there's a few sci-fi horror films that could have filled this spot, but I've decided to go with The Beach House. This was written and directed by Jeffrey A. Brown and is about a romantic getaway for two troubled college sweethearts turned into a struggle for survival when unexpected guests and the surrounding environment exhibit signs of a mysterious infection. Now, I think something that a lot of the movies on my list this year have in common is that they really surprised me, wowed me, turned a subgenre on its head, something like that. Like, I felt genuinely surprised while watching the films, and this is no exception. Granted, I saw this movie before there was even a trailer out, so I really didn't know anything about it when I went in, but the infectious disease, as they say in the IMDb plot summary, just comes into the movie in the most unexpected ways and traumatizes and terrorizes the characters in such interesting ways. And there's also just some really beautiful scenes. This movie just really did it for me and was very unexpected. Okay, now number 8, we have The Lodge. You know I love some Severin Fiala and Veronica Franz. I love these filmmakers and their dark, dark brains. This movie is such a sad, dark, chilly bummer of a movie, but I just loved it. It also had moments of huge surprise for me, things I didn't see coming. I really liked the characters and the ability that this movie had to actually like make me feel physically cold while watching it. Was very impressive. That one is on Hulu, I believe, and The Beach House is streaming on Shudder. Okay, next up is a movie that I just watched 2 days ago while I was doing my big like catch-up of 2020 horror films that I didn't watch yet. And this one made the list. It is La Llorona. This is the Guatemalan horror film that's streaming on Shudder. Because, okay, here's the thing. When, I think it's the Curse of La Llorona came out, which is like casually tied to the Conjuring universe. That came out, I think, in 2019. That movie bored me, and that made me so sad because I love La Llorona, like just as a tale, a folktale legend. Like, I just think she's so fascinating and sad and scary and has such great imagery, and just, I did not like that movie. I thought it was such a bore. And so I was kind of nervous about watching another take on it, but this one is so beautiful. This movie was written and directed by Jairo Bustamante, and he did such a beautiful job with this movie. It's about an aging, paranoid war criminal who's protected by his faithful wife and daughter, who faces death while being haunted by the ghost of his past. I didn't do a full review of this movie on my channel, but I will just tell you a couple of things that I love so much. I love that the backdrop of this movie is so politically intense. Literally, there is this war criminal that has basically gotten let off the hook at the beginning of the movie, and there are protests outside of his home through the entire film. There is always just these voices of these families that have lost family members because of this man that's sitting inside the house. And then he's dying, and as he's dying, we have this ghost, Lyrona, who takes form in a way that's unexpected in this movie. She lets him and also his wife, who has really been on his side, get a full understanding of what he has done to people and why he is guilty of his crimes. And it's just so dark. It is a slow burn. I will say it is like light on horror elements. There's not a lot of jump scares. There's not a lot of gore or things like that, but it is a haunting ghost story for sure. Highly recommend. It's on Shudder. I loved it. Okay, next in our number 6 spot, we have Freaky, the Christopher Landon movie that came out this year with Vince Vaughn. This is on my list because it is the movie that I needed in 2020. A lot of the movies on my list are quite bleak. There's not a lot of fun horror films. And I think that was somehow fitting because 2020 was super bleak. But this is the movie I needed because there's so much fun and lightness, and the kills are really creative and silly. The characters are silly. It's really enjoyable movie, and I really needed that when it came out. I was like, it was like a breath of fresh air. I was like, oh, thank you. This one is about a young girl in high school who accidentally swaps bodies with a deranged serial killer. She then has 24 hours before the change becomes permanent. So I really love that one. I had to add it to the list because it really did something for me this year. Next up, we have what feels like a movie that came out in 2019, but it just came out pre-COVID. And there are still posters for this movie along the subways, which is in New York, which is hilarious. And that is Oz Perkins' Gretel and Hansel. This movie stars Sophia Lillis, and I just loved this more feminine take on the Gretel and Hansel story and the real scary witch energy. It's a really good witch movie that also has these kind of like artistic moments that you don't expect that kind of keep you guessing in a way. I don't want to like spoil things. I'm sure you know the basic plot to Hansel and Gretel, but here you go. A long time ago in a distant fairy tale countryside, a young girl leads her little brother into the dark wood in desperate search for food and work, only to stumble upon a nexus of terrifying evil. Also, like the aesthetics and vibes of this movie are they just fed me. I was like, yes, this is everything I've ever wanted in a witch movie. Thank you. And I really liked it. All right, next one, number 4, is another movie I just checked out finally, and that is The Platform. And it's funny because I was like, wow, this is on a lot of people's lists, so I feel like I should definitely check it out before I make my video. And I'm so glad I did because I was obsessed with it. This movie was directed by Galder Gastelu Oratia. I hope I said that right. And it's about a vertical prison with 1 cell per level, 2 people per cell, only 1 food platform, and 2 minutes per day to feed. An endless nightmare trapped in the hole. It's so funny, when I was watching this, I texted my friend who I do a lot of theater with, and I was like, this movie is a play. This movie should be a play. It is so good. Everything from the script to the film to the imagery and I don't know, everything. I was like, I want to see this on stage, but that's besides the point. I just was obsessed with the concept of this movie and how well executed it was. It is so dark and upsetting and revealing of human nature, and it's a nightmare. It feels like an hour-and-a-half nightmare, but it's a horrifying concept, and the whole movie was just so beautifully executed. I love the characters. It's in Spanish, and it's just really freaking good. Whew, it's getting hot in here. I'm at the top 3 now. Number 3, Host. This DIY Zoom horror movie by Rob Savage truly came out of nowhere, and at a time where I thought the last thing I want to see is a Zoom horror movie. And I watched it, and it was so scary. It was such an amazing ghost movie. I jumped, I laughed. There was times where I wanted to cry because it got so real, 2020 style. And I just thought it was so effective. I was completely entertained from start to finish. This movie is a triumph of 2020 for sure. It was written, produced, filmed, edited all during the pandemic, and it is such a representation of like, here's something crazy we made during like the worst possible time to make things, and it's, as I said, a triumph. 6 friends hire a medium to hold a seance via Zoom during lockdown, but they get far more than they bargained for as things quickly go wrong. It was also filmed remotely. It's just is just amazing. Okay, top 2. Number 2, we have His House. This movie was written and directed by Remy Weeks and came out on Netflix, I think, on Halloween. It's a UK film about a refugee couple who makes a harrowing escape from the war-torn South Sudan. But then they struggle to adjust to their new life in an English town that has an evil lurking beneath the surface. This is the haunted house movie I was ready for. And I love ghost movies. I love haunted everything. Like, that is a subgenre I'm very invested in. And this movie really takes a lot of things that work about the haunted house subgenre and put it in a completely new setting with different characters, like having refugees dealing with a house that is full of like their own demons and ghosts from their past is so smart. It's so upsetting. It gives a totally different perspective of this type of movie versus like, you know, the suburban white family who moves into a haunted house and then the medium comes and then this happens. Like, it can get to be such an overdone formula. And this movie, I was surprised, entertained, amazed, scared, start to finish. The actors, incredible. The scares, scary. The imagery, really, really good. I just loved this movie. And if you haven't seen it, I really highly recommend it. All right, baby. And number 1. And then I'm going to do all my other ones that I wanted to put on the list and then couldn't fit. My number 1 is Leigh Whannell's The Invisible Man. And it's hard to say whether this is my number 1 because it is the last movie I saw in theaters. If you don't know, I live in New York and movie theaters have been shut down since, you know, the first lockdown, the first pandemic hit the US, and they have never opened again. So that my last time in a movie theater was The Invisible Man, and it will probably be that until, I'm guessing, spring or summer of 2021. Unclear. But this movie I thought was so brilliant, so scary. The level of tension I felt throughout, the number of surprises. I mean, there is like what I just call that scene, because I would never spoil it for you if you haven't seen it, because I would just never want that for you, because it has one of the most surprising scenes I've ever seen in a horror movie that I yelled out loud. It was sort of like a yell gasp out loud that me and the collective entire theater made together because it was so shocking. Elizabeth Moss is just spectacular, and oh my god. Oliver Jackson Cohen, who is the villain in this movie, he's freaking terrifying. And it's also the guy from Haunting of Hill House, and that blew my mind because he must be an incredible actor, because I literally didn't even know it was the same person until I was like Googling stuff for a review. He is so scary in this movie. When Cecilia's abusive ex takes his own life and leaves her his fortune, she suspects his death was a hoax. As a series of coincidences turn lethal, Cecilia works to prove that she is being hunted by somebody no one can see. And then also just like how Leigh Whannell dealt with the idea of the Invisible Man, which I think could have really easily been a very cheesy, silly thing and turned it into like the most horrifying thing ever. I was like, and I watched it again, by the way. I watched it again, I think in the summer with my cousin, just because I wanted to watch it again, and it hit just as hard the second time. So that's why it's number 1 on my list. I freaking love it. I think it's an amazing film. I really think it's the best movie that came out this year. And now let's hit the runner-ups. So there's a few. I'm just gonna talk about them very briefly. I'm not gonna say too much. One is Brea Grant's 12-Hour Shift. This movie, I really wanted to squeeze it on my list because I feel like it's one that not enough people have seen yet. I freaking love this movie. I think it is such a cool, different type of film. It's basically about a nurse that's like involved in the black market organ trade and like a night that goes really badly at the hospital, and it's so freaking fun and scary and weird and bloody. It's got David Arquette in it. It's great. Please do check that one out if you haven't. Next I have Possessor. I know this is gonna be on a top spot for a lot of people, and here's my thing. Sci-fi horror is not my favorite subgenre, and I will say that for me, this is just my truth. It might not be your truth, but it's mine. The Beach House, Possessor, and Color Out of Space are 3 movies that came out this year that I loved all of them. I thought they were all 3 really awesome freaking sci-fi horror films, but they all kind of did the same thing for me because it's not a subgenre I actively seek out and watch for funsies. But so thus, Color Out of Space is also on this list. I really like all three of them. So, like I said, that number 9 spot with the beach house, like really any 3 of these movies could have gone there for me because I think they're all 3 really, really awesome. The next one is one I just watched the other night, which is Hunter x Hunter. This movie was written and directed by Sean Linden and is basically about this family of trappers, like rabbit trappers that live out in the middle of nowhere, and there is something in the forest that is hunting. That's all I'll say. But there is a huge unexpected part of this movie that I will never give away because it's rude. But it is, it's kind of incredible. It was really surprising. It didn't make my top 10 list, but it's a really good movie that you should definitely check out. Hunter x Hunter. All right, next we have Natalie Erica James's Relic. This movie, which is like the dementia horror film that I reviewed a while back. I'm going to link any reviews I can remember to find down in the description of these movies that I've talked about more in depth. And I did review Relic. I really liked it. It's a very like sad, dark, ghostly movie. I don't know. It's really good. It didn't quite make the top 10, but I really enjoyed it. Another really sad one, Coco di Coco Da. This is a Swedish film about a couple that goes through a big tragedy and then they have to keep living the same nightmare over and over and over again. And it is this like this really dark, twisted nursery rhyme style nightmare. And it's so weird and sad, but really good. Oh, there's one more on here, and that's Anything for Jackson. This one was written by Keith Cooper and directed by Justin G. Dyke, and this is a great movie. It's about a Satanist couple that's basically trying to get their grandson back, and it is just so dark and weird and scary but funny. It's a really good movie. Highly recommend it. That one I think is on Shudder too. And now here are my special mentions. Okay, I have 2 anthologies that blew my mind this year. I had to mention them. They're both on Shudder, and that is Scare Package and the Mortuary Collection. They're both amazing. I don't even know which one I like more because they're both so good. My favorite kids horror movie, Vampires vs. the Bronx on Netflix. It is so fun. It's a kids adventure movie, vampires. It's excellent. My favorite, I'm just calling this low budget love. So like a really low budget movie, but I thought was awesome. Uncle Peckerhead. So gory, over the top, about a Jersey band that goes on tour with this flesh-eating demon. It's excellent. It's low budget, but it's really well done. My favorite, what I'm calling thriller. I know a lot of people have included this movie on their list. And for me, it's much more of a thriller than it is a true horror movie. And I've gone back and forth about this a lot. So I'm giving it a special place because I do think it's one of my favorite movies of the year. But I didn't know if I could really call it a horror film, and that is Swallow. It was written and directed by Carlo Mirabella Davis and is basically about a very unhappy housewife who starts finding herself more and more compelled to eat random household objects. Kind of like a very artistic, strange addiction film, but it is beautiful. This movie, like I said, it's one of my favorite ones that came out this year. It is just gorgeous, so sad. I cried a lot. It's a lot. It really feels like more of a drama to me, more than anything else. So I didn't include it in my top 10, but it is one of my favorites of the year. And then my last one, which I'm just saying this is my teen fantasy movie because there's definitely horror elements in it, but it's not really a horror movie. And that is Spontaneous. This movie I reviewed and ended up writing my grad school research paper about, basically, or I didn't write it about the movie, but this movie inspired my research paper this semester. And because it was so good. It's basically about a senior class of high schoolers that they start randomly, spontaneously combusting or exploding, whatever you want to call it. It's really dark and then also really funny and also really romantic and beautiful. It's just Catherine Langford. I love her as an actress. I think she's amazing. She's the lead in this, along with Charlie Plummer. It's just a wonderful, wonderful watch. Also made me cry a lot. And yeah, I'm gonna have to edit this video down because I know it's too long. But that's all the movies that I couldn't figure out how to fit on my list, but I had to just give them shout outs because I think they're all amazing. Even though 2020 was like one of the worst years ever, we did get a lot of really good horror films, so I'm grateful for that. And I think that's it, people. If you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and if I missed any of your favorite 2020 horror films, or you just want to give me your top 10 list, please do that in the comments. I'm genuinely interested in checking those lists out, because I love to see what I missed, honestly. But that's it. We're closing the computer on 2020, and I will see you the first week of January when I'm starting my Buffy series. So you're gonna get a lot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer videos in the first few weeks of January. So if you haven't seen it or need to rewatch or whatever, I would say you should get started because we have a lot to talk about. And that's it, people. Happy New Year and have a nice scream. Bye.